The bank alert landed on my son's phone at exactly 10:47 a.m. A $3.2 million villa purchase. By noon, my own phone was buzzing like an angry hornet. And by evening, I had somehow become the most talked about woman in Connecticut. All it took was shattering my family's carefully laid expectations. 3 days earlier, it had been my 64th birthday. March 15th, the same date it's always been for 64 years. But somehow, my son Brian and his darling wife Sarah managed to forget once again. Conveniently, their annual spring getaway lined up with my birthday. And what a miracle, it also just happened to coincide with Sarah's mother, Patricia Wells, whose birthday falls on March 12th. I wasn't stupid. I'd figured out this little charade 5 years ago. But this year I decided to change the script.
No hints. No guilt trips.
No pathetic reminder texts asking if they had time for me. I simply smiled and waved as they drove off for their spa weekend in Vermont. The moment their car disappeared down the driveway, I picked up the phone. Jennifer, I told my real estate agent, find me the most beautiful waterfront property within 50 miles. Money is no object. She thought I was joking, until 4 hours later, when we stood in the marble foyer of a contemporary villa overlooking Long Island Sound. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A gourmet kitchen worth more than most people's cars. A master suite with its own fireplace. A deck that made you feel like you were floating above the water. It's $3.2 million, Mrs. Thompson, Jennifer said gently, as though delivering bad news. I'll take it. Don't you want to think about it? Maybe discuss it with your family. I almost laughed. When had my family ever discussed anything with me? Jennifer, I'm 64 years old, and I've been thinking for most of them. Wire the funds tomorrow. By Wednesday afternoon, the deed was in my name. By Thursday morning, I was posting photos across every social media account I could still access. The living room drenched in ocean light. The kitchen island set with champagne and an indulgent dinner for one. The deck where I toasted the most peaceful birthday I'd had in decades. My caption was simple. Birthday celebrations at my new home. Sometimes the best gifts are the ones you give yourself. That's when the storm hit. At 10:52 a.m., just 5 minutes after the bank alert, Brian's name lit up my phone. He'd been monitoring my accounts for years. Not officially, of course, but ever since his father passed, he'd made himself joint account holder for emergencies and set alerts for large transactions. His way of keeping tabs on Mom, making sure I didn't make any foolish decisions. How thoughtful. I let it go to voicemail. Then Sarah called. Then Patricia Wells herself. Then Brian again, over and over until my screen showed a flood of missed calls and texts. By 2 p.m. I counted 17. Some polite. Some panicked. Some dripping with false concern. My personal favorite was from Sarah. Mom Thompson, we're worried about you. This isn't like you. Please call us so we know you're okay. Isn't like me? Lady, you have no idea what I'm like. You've only known the version of me who bent over backward for everyone else's convenience. Today you're meeting Margaret Thompson. Property owner, woman of independent means. I spent that afternoon unpacking the few boxes I'd brought. Family albums, my grandmother's china, the quilt my mother stitched for my wedding. Every ring of the phone made me smile wider. By dinner time, I'd racked up 23 missed calls. The messages were growing frantic, even desperate. But here's what none of them knew. What none of them had bothered to ask since the day my husband died. Aunt Helen. Sweet, unmarried Aunt Helen, who lived quietly in her Boston brownstone, collecting vintage jewelry. The same Aunt Helen Brian and Sarah met twice, yet couldn't even bother to attend her funeral last September. The Aunt Helen who left her entire estate, all $7.3 million of it, to me. After taxes and fees, I walked away with more than enough to do exactly what I pleased, for the first time in my adult life. So yes, I bought myself a villa. And as I poured a glass of wine from my new wine fridge and watched the sun melt into the horizon over water that was now mine, I finally felt visible again. My phone still buzzed endlessly, but I'd silenced it. Tomorrow could bring explanations and awkward family confrontations. Tonight was mine. For 6 years, my birthdays have been treated like scheduling inconveniences. Always an excuse. Always bad timing. Year 1. Patricia broke her hip just days before my birthday. Emergency unavoidable. They rushed to Vermont. We'd celebrate later. Except later never came. Year 2. Patricia's so-called cardiac scare. Later chalked up to anxiety and too much caffeine. Again they abandoned me. I blew out candles over a grocery store cake, waiting for a promise that never arrived. Years 3 and 4. Different emergencies, same pattern. My birthday swallowed by someone else's drama. But it was year 5 that opened my eyes. I was driving to the grocery store, resigned to another lonely evening, when I saw them, Brian, Sarah, and Patricia, laughing over champagne at a bistro downtown. Patricia looked perfectly healthy for someone supposedly bedridden. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, watching my son celebrate another woman, while his own mother sat home wondering if she'd done something wrong. That was the day I realized this wasn't bad luck. It was a choice. Patricia had claimed the second week of March for herself, and my son had chosen her over me. So this year I chose silence.
No reminders. No begging. No desperate hints.
I waved them off on their trip with a smile, then called Jennifer the moment they were out of sight. And now, as I sit in my villa, feet up on furniture that's mine alone, I can't help but laugh at the irony. They trained me to be invisible, and now they don't even notice I've disappeared. My phone lit up with yet another call, but I didn't answer. Brian called for the 4th time in a single hour. This time I answered. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady and pleasant. "Mom, thank God. Where are you? What's going on?" "Jennifer from Coastal Realty called and said you bought a house. A $3.2 million house." "I did indeed," I replied calmly. "It's lovely, Brian. Waterfront property. Just like I've always wanted." Silence. Then his voice low and cautious. "Mom, are you feeling all right? This is very unlike you." Unlike me. There it was again, that same patronizing phrase. As though I were a fragile little mouse who couldn't make a single decision without committee approval. "I'm feeling wonderful, actually," I said, gazing out at the glittering water. "Better than I have in years." "How's Patricia's birthday celebration going?" Another pause. "It's fine. But Mom, we need to talk about this house purchase. This is a major financial decision. You should have consulted with us first." "Should I? Why?" Because you're not thinking clearly. You don't just buy a $3.2 million home on impulse." I walked toward the vast windows. Outside, a sailboat glided past, its white sails catching the late afternoon sun. "Who says it was an impulse?" I asked softly. "Mom, you can't afford this. Dad's life insurance was comfortable, but not that comfortable. What were you thinking?" And there it was, the assumption that had colored every interaction with my son these past years. Brian had decided I was fragile. Financially fragile. Emotionally fragile. Probably mentally fragile, too. A woman to be managed. Controlled. Protected from her own supposed poor judgment. "Brian," I said gently, "there are quite a few things about my financial situation you don't know." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm not the helpless widow you've been treating me like. And this conversation is far from over. But right now I have a new house to enjoy. And a birthday to celebrate." "Mom, wait." But I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off and poured myself another glass of wine. Tonight was still mine. Tomorrow would bring the difficult conversations. What Brian didn't know was that the inheritance that changed everything had been sitting in my account for 6 months before I even told him Aunt Helen had passed. And yes, I know how that sounds. Who doesn't mention a death in the family? But the truth was, to Brian and Sarah, Helen barely existed. Brian had met her twice in his 38 years. Sarah shook her hand at our wedding and promptly forgot her name. When I brought her up in conversation, they'd nod politely, their eyes vacant. But Helen, she was so much more than they ever bothered to know. My father's sister. A woman who defied every expectation of her generation. She worked her way from secretary to vice president at a Boston insurance firm. Bought her brownstone in the 80s, when Back Bay was still affordable. Invested quietly, wisely, building a fortune without fanfare. And she lived life entirely on her own terms. Sharp, funny, unapologetic. Everything I had once been told women were not supposed to be. I visited her every other month. We went to museums, explored new restaurants, wandered the public garden. She told me about her travels, her art, her complicated relationship with our father. When cancer came for her last May, I was the one who sat through chemo appointments, the one who organized her affairs when the treatments failed, the one holding her hand on the Tuesday morning she took her last breath. Brian and Sarah? They sent flowers. They were in Napa for a wine tasting and couldn't possibly rearrange their plans. After the funeral, her lawyer, Marcus Reed, asked me to stay. He handed me a sealed envelope. Helen wanted you to read this privately. Inside, in Helen's precise script, was a letter. Dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably sitting in Marcus's office trying not to cry in front of a stranger. Stop it. I lived exactly the life I wanted, and I have no regrets. What you need to know is this. I've left you everything. The house, the investments, the art collection, all of it. Not because you're my only living relative, but because you're the only one who ever saw me as a person, not an embarrassment or an obligation. I've watched your family for years. That son of yours loves you, but his wife and her mother have programmed him to see you as a burden. They've convinced him you're fragile, incapable, untrustworthy with your own decisions. It's a subtle form of control, Margaret. I've seen it destroy too many women. Don't let it destroy you. You are stronger and smarter than they'll ever admit. Use this inheritance to remember who you were before you became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's afterthought. Live boldly. Make them remember you are Margaret Thompson. When Marcus showed me the numbers, I could hardly breathe. The brownstone worth $1.8 million. Investments, $4.2 million. The art collection, $1.3 million. After taxes and fees, I inherited just over $7.3 million. I sat in his office for an hour, staring at the papers, thinking about Helen's words. She was right. Ever since Dad died, Brian and Sarah had slipped into the role of caretakers. Brian became a joint account holder for emergencies. He told me to switch to a simpler phone because a smartphone was too complicated at my age. He took over my investments, insisting finances were stressful. Piece by piece, I surrendered my independence, convincing myself it was easier to let them steer. But Helen's gift had changed everything. For the first time in decades, I had the power to choose, to act, to live. So I watched my family more closely. Their condescending smiles when I talked about traveling. The way Sarah and Brian exchanged looks whenever I offered an opinion about anything beyond babysitting. The assumption that my life revolved around their convenience. And then came March. Another year. Another sacrifice of my birthday to Patricia Wells' theatrics. And I knew at last what I wanted. To stop being invisible. The villa was just the beginning. A declaration that Margaret Thompson would no longer play the supporting role in her own life. Brian's frantic calls, Sarah's panic texts. Proof the message had landed. And still they had no idea what else was coming. Because Helen's brownstone was still mine. The investment properties untouched. The art collection waiting in storage. And $4 million quietly earning interest while I planned the next phase of my freedom. That evening, another text lit up my phone. Mom, we're coming home early. Please don't make any more major decisions until we get there. I smiled, set the phone aside, and sipped my wine. For the first time in years, my life wasn't theirs to manage. It was mine. I smiled at his text and typed back, "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." What I didn't mention was that I had a meeting with a financial advisor tomorrow to discuss expanding my property portfolio, or that I'd already set up appointments with 3 different travel agents to plan the European tour I'd dreamed about for years. Some surprises are worth waiting for. Brian showed up at my new villa at 7:30 a.m. Saturday morning, a full day and a half early from his Vermont trip. He looked like a man who had driven through the night. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "We need to talk," he said flatly, without even a greeting. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart," I replied lightly.
Come in.
"I'll make coffee." He followed me through the marble foyer into the kitchen, his eyes darting from chandelier to countertops, like he was gathering evidence for a case against me. I busied myself with the coffee maker, the gleaming stainless steel machine that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage. "Mom, this is insane," he burst out. "You can't just buy a $3.2 million house without discussing it with anyone. What were you thinking?" I measured the coffee grounds slowly, deliberately. I was thinking that I'm a grown woman with my own money who wanted to buy a house. "Cream in your coffee? Don't be flippant. This is serious. Do you even realize what kind of financial commitment you've made? The property taxes alone. About $32,000 annually," I said calmly. "Already budgeted for." He froze, staring at me. "How could you possibly budget for that?" "Mom, Dad's life insurance was $400,000. Even with your savings and Social Security, you don't have this kind of money." And there it was, the moment I had been waiting for. My son, so certain of my limits, had never actually bothered to understand my reality. "Brian," I said evenly, "when was the last time you actually looked at my bank statements? I don't mean monitoring for suspicious charges. I mean truly looked." He hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. "I checked for any large withdrawals or scams, to protect you." "How thoughtful," I said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "But what you've really been doing is watching how I spend, without the slightest idea of how much I earn." He blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" I sat at the kitchen island, gesturing for him to sit too. Behind me, the morning sun glittered across Long Island Sound, too beautiful a backdrop for the storm brewing between us. "It means," I said slowly, "that for the past 6 months, you've treated me like a frail pensioner, someone who needs supervision to stop her from blowing through a fixed income. What you didn't know is that I inherited $7.3 million from Aunt Helen." His coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. "What?" "Aunt Helen passed away in September," I explained softly. "She left me everything." "That's impossible." She was nobody. She worked at an insurance company. She was vice president of that insurance company for 2 decades. She also owned prime real estate in Boston and had a very impressive portfolio. But you wouldn't know that, because you never bothered to know her." Brian set his mug down with shaking hands. $7 million, and you didn't tell me? "Should I have?" I asked. "You've spent the last 5 years convincing me I can't be trusted with my own decisions. Why would I come to you for advice when you treat me like a child?" "That's not true, Mom. I never said that. You didn't need to say it. You showed it. Joint bank accounts so you could monitor me. A simplified phone plan because apparently technology is beyond me. Investment management because financial planning must be too stressful for someone my age. Do you hear yourself?" His cheeks flushed just like they had when he was a boy caught in a lie. "I was only trying to help. Sarah said seniors make poor financial choices. Families should step in." "Step in before what?" I snapped. "Before I spend my money on my dreams instead of yours? That's not fair." "Brian, questioning every purchase I make over $500 isn't just unfair. It's control." Silence fell heavy between us. He turned toward the water, struggling with the truth I just handed him. I sipped my coffee and waited. 38 years of motherhood had taught me when to push, and when to let him find his own footing. Finally, his voice came quieter. "Why didn't you tell me about Aunt Helen?" "Because I wanted to see how you'd react to me making my own choices," I said. "And your reaction is exactly what I expected: panic, anger, and the assumption that I'm incapable." "I'm not angry," he protested, though his voice trembled. "I'm concerned. This house, it's not you, Mom. It's too big, too expensive, too flashy." "Too flashy for what?" I pressed. "For a widowed senior who should just be grateful for whatever crumbs of attention her family gives her?" That's not what I meant. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me what I wanted, Brian? What my dreams were? My plans for the future? You haven't. Because you don't see me as a woman with desires. You see me as a responsibility. For a long time he was silent. Then slowly something shifted in his eyes. Not anger but recognition. I thought I was protecting you, he whispered. From what? I asked gently. From living my own life? From mistakes? From the world changing too fast? I reached across the counter and took his hand. Sweetheart, I raised you. I managed your father's business for 30 years. I survived becoming a widow. I can handle buying a house. Brian swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Where's Sarah? I asked. Doesn't she want to see the place? His expression tightened. She's still in Vermont with Patricia. Apparently, this purchase is exactly the kind of behavior Patricia warned her about. She thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I am, I said with a cool smile. If standing up for myself counts as a breakdown. I met his eyes. The question is, are you going to support me? Or are you going to keep treating me like a problem that needs solving? He looked around the kitchen again, taking in the marble countertops, the view worth more per square foot than his entire house. Finally, his voice softened. This is really what you want. This is really what I want. He nodded. Then, I guess we need to figure out how to make it work. It wasn't the full approval I'd hoped for, but it was a start. And for the first time since he walked in, Brian looked less like a financial advisor scolding a reckless client, and more like my son. That afternoon we sat on the deck, talking about things we hadn't touched in years, my dreams for retirement, his fears for his own future, the ways both of us had changed since his father died. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in months. But deep down I knew the real test was still to come. Sarah and Patricia would be back soon. And I knew they wouldn't accept this new version of me as easily as Brian was beginning to. By Sunday evening my phone had turned into a war zone of family drama. News of my villa purchase had spread through the family like wildfire, and suddenly everyone had an opinion, about the house, about me, and about what they thought was wrong with me. The first call came from my sister Linda. Maggie, I heard about your house. Are you having some kind of midlife crisis? I almost laughed. Linda, I'm 64. If this is a midlife crisis, then I must be planning to live to 128. But Linda wasn't amused. This isn't funny. Brian is worried sick, Sarah's beside herself, and Patricia thinks you might need some kind of intervention. Of course Patricia thinks that. Patricia Wells always had opinions, loud ones, and somehow they had become gospel truth for my daughter-in-law. What exactly does Patricia think I need an intervention for? Buying real estate with my own money. For making major life decisions without consulting family. For isolating yourself from people who care about you. For spending recklessly when you should be planning for your future care needs. I nearly laughed again. Future care needs? As though I were one step away from assisted living instead of a healthy 64-year-old woman with excellent health care and enough money to hire help if I ever needed it. Linda, let me ask you something. When you and Robert bought your Florida condo, did you ask anyone's permission? That's different, she protested. Why? Because you discussed it with Robert? Well, I discussed this with myself. Extensively. I'm not married, Linda. I don't need anyone's permission to spend my own money. The second call was from Michael, my nephew, clearly sent by Linda to check on me. Aunt Maggie, Mom asked me to see if you're okay. This whole house thing doesn't seem like something you'd do. There it was again, not something I do. As if my family had already written the rulebook on who Margaret Thompson was allowed to be, and any deviation meant I must be losing my mind. Michael, what do you think I would do? What kind of person do you think I am? You're practical. Conservative. You don't make impulsive decisions. And you think this was impulsive? Well, yeah. Kind of. I looked out at the deck, where that morning I'd sip coffee while watching boats glide past on the water. Michael, I've been looking at waterfront properties for 2 years. Planning this purchase for months. The only impulsive part was the timing. He hesitated. But why now? Why not wait until summer? Because I got tired of being forgotten on my own birthday. Because if I waited for approval from this family, I'd die waiting. Because sometimes you have to do something dramatic to remind people that you exist. Because I found the perfect house and I could afford it. Sometimes life is just that simple. The third call was the one I'd been dreading, Sarah. And of course Patricia was listening in. Mom Thompson, we need to talk. Hello, Sarah. How's the extended vacation? It's not a vacation anymore. We stayed because we're concerned. Patricia thinks this purchase might be a sign of cognitive decline. There it was again, Patricia thinks. And what do you think, Sarah? She paused. I think you're acting very unlike yourself. Maybe that's the point. What's that supposed to mean? Maybe I got tired of being the version of myself that you've all decided I am. Maybe I wanted to see what would happen if I acted like someone with agency and independence, instead of some fragile old woman who needs constant supervision. No one's supervising you, she protested. Really? Brian monitors my bank accounts. You and he make plans without ever asking what I want. Patricia hands down advice about my life as if she has authority over me. If that's not supervision, what is it? I could hear muffled whispers, Patricia coaching her in the background. We're just worried about you making such big decisions without thinking them through. Sarah, I have a graduate degree and 30 years of business experience. I think I'm capable of buying a house. A $3.2 million house, she shot back. Yes, the house I wanted and the house I could afford. Just like you and Brian bought yours. Remember? Because you wanted it and you could afford it. That's different. We're younger. We have income. We consulted financial advisors. And I have income too. Quite a lot, in fact. And yes, I did consult an advisor. The conversation unraveled quickly after that. Sarah's frustration grew sharper by the minute, because for once her usual methods of controlling me weren't working. By the time we hung up, she'd announced that she and Patricia were cutting their vacation short to come and have a proper conversation about my living situation. The fourth call came from Brian. Predictably, he'd been briefed. Mom, we need to sit down as a family and discuss this situation. What situation? That I bought a house I love with money I earned. The situation where you made a major decision without considering how it affects us. And there it was, the truth. Not that I'd made a mistake, but that I'd disrupted their carefully drawn plans for managing my life. Brian, how does my living in a waterfront villa negatively affect you? It doesn't. But it's not about the house, it's about the pattern. The secrecy with your inheritance. The impulsive purchase. The way you're shutting us out. I'm not shutting anyone out. I'm just not asking for permission anymore. By the time I finished returning all the calls, messages, and guilt-laden texts, it was past 9. I poured a glass of wine and sat on my deck, listening to waves brush the shore. My family was in full-blown crisis mode over my decision, not because the house was a poor investment, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I dared to choose it myself. Tomorrow, Sarah and Patricia would arrive with righteous indignation, probably armed with better real estate listings and careful suggestions that I was unfit to handle my own affairs. But tonight? Tonight I sat in my own home on my own deck, drinking my own wine, making my own plans. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not someone's mother. Not someone's burden. Not someone's project to manage. Just Margaret Thompson. Monday morning arrived with the invasion I'd been expecting. At exactly 8 a.m., Sarah and her mother Patricia Wells stood at my front door, armed with real estate listings, glossy brochures on financial planning, and the kind of tight smiles that barely disguised their irritation. The first thing Patricia did was glance at my marble foyer, wrinkle her nose and say, "Well, it certainly is large. Good morning to you too, Patricia."
Sara, come in.
I'll put on coffee. They followed me into the kitchen like a delegation from the Department of Poor Life Choices. Patricia's sharp eyes scanned the room, cataloging every detail she could later use against me. The imported tile, the top-of-the-line appliances, the sweeping view from my windows. Patricia settled herself at my kitchen island as though she were about to conduct an official intervention. Margaret, we need to discuss what's really going on here. What's going on? I replied, pouring coffee. Is that I bought a house. Would you like cream? Don't be glib. Patricia opened her folder, revealing a carefully prepared presentation. This purchase represents several concerning patterns of behavior. Patterns Sarah and I have been discussing. Sarah and I have been discussing. Of course they had. My daughter-in-law and her mother dissecting my life like I was a case study in geriatric psychology. And what patterns would those be? I asked. Sarah jumped in, her words sounding rehearsed. Secretiveness about major financial changes. Impulsive decision-making. Withdrawal from family activities. And now this purchase. A house that seems more about proving something than meeting your actual needs. Interesting theory, I said, my voice steady. And what exactly do you think I'm trying to prove? Patricia leaned forward, her tone dripping with condescension. That you don't need family input. That you're still capable of handling complex finances. That you're not ready for the kind of guided living situation that would be more appropriate. Guided living situation? I nearly choked on my coffee. Is that what we're calling assisted living now? Sarah jumped in quickly. We're not talking about assisted living, Mom Thompson. We're talking about age-appropriate housing. Communities with support systems. I looked at the brochures spread across my counter. Sunnybrook Senior Living. Golden Years Community. Heritage Oaks Retirement Village. All smiling silver-haired couples playing board games and stretching into gentle yoga poses. These are senior communities, Sarah. They're active adult communities with excellent amenities and healthcare partnerships. Patricia corrected with a rehearsed smile. I kept my voice cool. How thoughtful of you, Patricia, to research my living situation without me. I wasn't aware that was your responsibility. Her smile grew tighter. Margaret, I've been watching this family struggle. Brian is worried sick about your judgment. Sarah is exhausted from trying to balance her family with concern for you. Something has to change. You're right, I said, setting down my cup. Something does need to change. And what needs to change is this assumption that I require management by committee. I'm 64, not 94. I have a degree, business experience, and more money than most people dream of. I don't need Patricia Wells dictating where I live. The mask slipped and Patricia's tone sharpened. Someone needs to provide perspective. You're obviously not thinking clearly. Because I bought a house you wouldn't have chosen? I asked. Because you bought $1 million property without consulting anyone who cares about you. Patricia snapped. I consulted the person whose opinion matters most, mine. Sarah tried softening the blow. We're not trying to control you. We're trying to support you. But the secrecy around Aunt Helen's inheritance, this house, your distance from family gatherings, it's concerning. I laughed without humor. When was the last time I was invited to a family gathering that wasn't built entirely around your convenience? You invite me after everything's already planned. Never once asking what I want. Silence. Neither had an answer. Let me save you the trouble, I said. I'm not moving into a senior community. I'm not handing over my financial decisions. And I won't pretend this is about my welfare when it's really about your discomfort with my independence. Patricia's veneer of concern finally cracked. Your independence? You're being selfish. Irresponsible. Families depend on stability. We expect you to act like the mature adult you're supposed to be. Not some rebellious teenager buying sports cars and tattoos. The image made me laugh. Patricia, I bought a house with my money. How exactly does that threaten you? It affects everyone's ability to plan for the future, she said coldly. You're disrupting the family balance. And there it was, the truth. This wasn't about me. It was about their need to control and predict my place in their lives. Sarah jumped in again. Families make decisions together, Mom. We need consistency. We need stability. I've given you both for decades, I said firmly. But stability doesn't mean I can't change. Consistency doesn't mean I stop growing. I'm not a piece of furniture, Sarah. I'm a person with my own dreams. Silence again. Then Patricia gathered her brochures with a huff.
Fine.
Make your mistake. But when this house becomes too much, when independence feels more like isolation, don't expect us to pick up the pieces. I wouldn't dream of it, I told her. When they left, I sat in my sunlit kitchen, staring out at the view they hated so much. Patricia was right about one thing. Independence wasn't the same as happiness. But for the first time in years, I finally had a chance to find my happiness. 2 weeks later, everything changed. While cleaning out Dad's old desk, I found a manila folder hidden behind outdated appliance warranties. The tab was labeled in my late husband's careful handwriting. Brian Private. Inside, my world shifted. Bank statements, loan applications, letters, documents that revealed a life my son had hidden from me. Brian owed $47,000 in credit card debt. His mortgage was 3 months behind. And worst of all, he had taken out a second mortgage on his house, using me as the co-signer. The signature wasn't mine. It had been forged. 2 months after his father's funeral, I sat frozen in Dad's chair, staring at the proof of my own son's betrayal. For the first time in my life, Brian felt like a stranger. The Brian I once knew was steady, careful with money. A man who had inherited his father's cautious respect for every dollar. But the Brian staring back at me through these documents was unrecognizable. Reckless, desperate, and willing to cross legal lines I never thought he would. The money was bad enough, but the timing, that was what shattered me. Every financial crisis, every loan application, every desperate attempt to patch a sinking ship lined up perfectly with Patricia Wells' so-called health emergencies. The sudden trips to Vermont, the canceled birthdays, the family gatherings that had been postponed or ruined. All of them overlapped with moments when Brian's finances were collapsing. My stomach turned cold. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus Reed, Aunt Helen's lawyer, the man who had handled my inheritance. Marcus, I need you to run a credit check under my name. I think someone's been using my identity. 3 hours later, the truth arrived, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Brian hadn't just forged my signature on his second mortgage. He'd taken out 2 credit cards in my name, along with a personal loan using my social security number. My once flawless credit score had plummeted, dragged down by debts I never touched. The doorbell rang just as I was reviewing the report. Through the window, I spotted a silver BMW parked in my driveway. Sarah's car. She stood there on my porch, clutching a small gift bag like it was her lifeline. Mom Thompson, I hope I'm not interrupting. I brought you something from Vermont, a peace offering. Curious, I let her in. She handed me the bag with a nervous smile. Inside was a snow globe of a cozy Vermont inn, with a card tucked beside it. Thinking of you, Patricia. Patricia asked me to give you this. She feels bad about how things went the other day, Sarah said softly. I set the snow globe on the entry table. Would you like some coffee? Actually, I was hoping we could talk about the house situation, but also about other things. We settled into the living room. Sarah perched on the edge of my new sofa, tense, ready to run. Mom Thompson, I owe you an apology. Patricia and we may have overreacted about the house purchase. It's just, Brian's been so stressed lately. And when you bought this place without telling him, he kind of fell apart. Stressed about what? I asked sharply. Her carefully composed mask cracked. Work stuff. The usual pressures. You know how he is about money. Yes, I knew. Better than she realized. Sarah, how long have you known about Brian's financial problems? Her face drained of color. What financial problems? The credit card debt. The mortgage issues. The loans he's taken out in my name. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, but her eyes betrayed her. Sarah knew exactly what I was talking about. The forged signatures, Sarah. The identity theft. And the fact that every one of Patricia's emergencies just happened to land when Brian needed to cover up money problems. That was it. Her composure broke completely. He didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. It started small. Just one credit card to get through a rough patch. And then Patricia really did get sick. The medical bills. What medical bills? Patricia has excellent insurance. Not for the treatments she needed. The experimental therapies, the private specialists. Brian felt responsible. She's been so good to our family. The puzzle pieces slid together like knives twisting into my chest. Sarah. Exactly how much money has Brian given to Patricia? Her eyes darted away. It's not giving. It's investing. She has connections in medical research. She's helping Brian put money into promising treatments. When they pay off, we'll make back everything. Plus returns. My blood froze. Sarah. Patricia Wells doesn't have connections in medical research. She was an office manager at an insurance company before she retired.
No.
That's not true. She has friends in pharmaceutical development. She showed us research papers, projected returns. She showed you fake documents. She's been bleeding your family dry. And Brian's been stealing from me to keep her happy. Sarah shot to her feet. That's not true. Patricia would never. She's been like a mother to me. A mother who's pushed you to enable your husband's crimes. Brian has committed fraud, identity theft, and ruined my credit score. All to fund Patricia's lies. You're wrong, Sarah's voice shook. Patricia cares about us. She's been orchestrating your family's ruin piece by piece for years. Every emergency, every crisis, every plea for help. It's all part of her con. Sarah backed toward the door, pale and trembling. I have to go. You're not thinking clearly. The move, the stress, the isolation. This isn't you. Sarah, wait. But the door slammed shut before I could finish. She was gone. Only the snow globe remained, mocking me from the table. A glittering token of betrayal. I grabbed my phone again. Marcus, I said, my voice low and tight. I need you to investigate someone for me. Patricia Wells. Age around 70. Last known address, Vermont. I want everything, her financial history, family connections, any legal skeleton she's hiding. May I ask why? He said cautiously. Because I think she's been running a con on my family. And my son has been stealing from me to finance it. 2 hours later, Marcus called back with the kind of news that makes your stomach drop. Patricia Wells wasn't Patricia Wells. Her real name was Patricia Warren. And her history stretched across 3 states, 2 decades, and a trail of broken families. Marcus laid it out for me. Patricia had been preying on families with aging parents and financial resources since the early 2000s. The pattern was always the same. Befriend a younger woman with access to money. Slide into the role of a mother figure. Then, one crisis at a time, drain them dry. She's been arrested twice, Marcus told me. Florida, 2018 elder fraud. North Carolina, 2015 insurance fraud. Both cases dismissed. Plea deals. Lack of evidence. My heart pounded. And her connection to Brian and Sarah? How long has this been going on? From the records you gave me, the first loan Brian took was September 2019. And that lines up with the first Patricia Wells health emergency on your family calendar. For years. Patricia Warren had been dismantling my son's financial life for 4 years. And I'd been too distracted by my own hurt to see it. How much has Brian given her in total? I whispered. About $180,000, Marcus said grimly. Then his voice lowered. But Margaret, there's more. I braced myself. What? She's not working alone. Patricia Warren has a partner. Someone who identifies and researches her targets. Someone with access to personal details, your finances, your personality, your relationship with Brian and Sarah. My skin crawled. Who? I don't know yet. But whoever it is, they've been feeding her everything she needs to destroy your family from the inside out. This wasn't random. This was calculated. Planned down to the last detail. After hanging up with Marcus, I sat in my living room, staring out at the water. My son wasn't the villain, I realized that now. He was a victim, manipulated by a professional con artist who had spent years weaving herself into the fabric of our family. But that didn't excuse the lies, The forged signatures, the stolen identity. Someone had given Patricia access to our most private information, and I was going to find out who. Just then my phone rang. Brian. His voice was strained. Mom, I need to talk to you. Can you come over? Please don't bring anyone else. 20 minutes later, I stood in Brian and Sarah's living room, staring at my son's haggard face. His eyes were sunken, his hands restless. How had I missed the signs? Mom, he whispered, I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate me for it. Try me. His confession came in a rush. I've been stealing from you, taking money from your accounts, forging your signature on loans, using your credit. The mortgage, the cards, the personal loans, everything. About $180,000 total. I sank into the sofa. My own son. Why? He buried his face in his hands. It was Patricia. She needed money for medical treatments, experimental therapies her insurance wouldn't cover. She showed me research results, projections. I thought it was temporary, just until her appeals went through. Brian. My voice cracked with both fury and sorrow. Patricia Wells isn't who she says she is. He looked up confused. What are you talking about? I told him everything Marcus had uncovered. The fake identity, the criminal record, the trail of ruined families. With every word, Brian grew paler, until he looked like a ghost of himself. That's impossible, he stammered. Patricia's been part of our family for years. She introduced me to Sarah. She encouraged Sarah's graduate studies. She's been at every birthday, every holiday. And then he said it, the detail that made everything snap into place. She introduced Sarah and me at a financial conference. She thought we'd hit it off. My stomach dropped. What kind of conference? Estate planning. Senior financial services. She said she was consulting. I leaned forward, my voice sharp. Brian, was this before or after your father's diagnosis? Right before. Why? Oh God, he went pale. You think Patricia targeted us because of Dad? I think she researched our family before she ever let you meet Sarah. She knew Dad was dying. She knew I'd inherit money. She knew you'd be in a position to access my accounts. Brian staggered to the window, gripping the frame like it was the only thing holding him up. Sarah doesn't know, he whispered. She can't know. Or she's working with her. He spun around furious. No. Mom, you can't believe that. Sarah loves me. Then how much does she really know? About the loans? The forged documents? The identity theft? He shook his head. She knows we've been helping Patricia. That's all. She doesn't know. Or she's pretending not to. Before he could answer, headlights swept across the room. Sarah was home. Brian's panic was instant. Don't tell her we talked about this. Not yet. Brian, we don't have time. Patricia is running a sophisticated con, and Sarah might be in on it. She's not, he snapped. But his eyes betrayed him. The front door opened. Sarah walked in, bags in hand, smile plastered on her face. Too bright, too rehearsed. Mother Thompson, she said lightly. What a surprise. But the nervous flicker in her eyes told me everything. Hello, Sarah, I said evenly. Brian and I were just discussing family finances. Her smile faltered. Oh? Nothing serious, I hope. Actually, very serious. Patricia's medical expenses. How they've been impacting your budget. Her answers were evasive, slippery. The doctors' names? She didn't remember. The research facility? Boston or maybe Burlington. Patricia handled it all. Every word rang hollow. I looked at Brian. He was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. That night, long after I left their house, I began digging. I scrolled through Sarah's social media with the precision of a detective, and what I found chilled me. Her Instagram was polished, 5 years of curated happiness. But the timeline was wrong. Their first photos as a couple appeared months after they supposedly met.
No casual beginnings.
No early dating snapshots. Just suddenly a couple with Patricia seamlessly woven into every scene, birthdays, holidays, even the wedding planning. where she seemed more present than either mother of the bride or groom. Then I turned to Patricia's Facebook. Her profile claimed she'd lived in Vermont her entire life, but her tagged photos told another story. Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, each with a different family, always smiling at their tables, always celebrated as Grandma Pat. One album labeled My Florida Family showed her opening gifts beside a teenage girl. She wore the same necklace she later wore to Brian and Sarah's wedding. Another album, from North Carolina, had her at a graduation party, surrounded by young adults calling her Grandma Pat in the comments. The pattern was unmistakable. Patricia infiltrated families, became indispensable, drained their resources and vanished, only to reappear somewhere new. But Sarah's role? That was still the question. Victim or accomplice? The answer came that night at 11:30 p.m. My security system pinged, movement in the driveway. I peered through the window. Sarah's car, parked at the bottom of the drive, headlights off. She sat there for minutes, phone pressed to her ear, then slipped out and crept toward my deck. She tried the sliding door. Locked. Frustrated, she made another call, pacing like a trapped animal. After 10 tense minutes, she got back into her car and drove away. And in that moment I knew. Sarah wasn't just Patricia's pawn. She was part of the game. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Marcus Reed. Marcus, I need you to run a background check on Sarah Mitchell. That was her maiden name before she married Brian. He hesitated. Any particular reason? I think she might be working with Patricia Warren. I need to know if Sarah is who she claims to be. The results came back within hours, and they confirmed my worst fears. Sarah Mitchell had never worked for the financial services company she bragged about. The university degree she'd shown Brian was a forgery. Her entire employment history was fabricated. Even her age was a lie. She wasn't 32 but 38. And the most damning detail of all? In 2015, Sarah Mitchell had been living in North Carolina, the very same city where Patricia Warren had been arrested for insurance fraud. Margaret, Marcus said when he called me back, his voice heavy. I think your daughter-in-law is Patricia Warren's daughter. The room tilted around me. Her daughter. I whispered. Yes. Patricia Warren has a daughter named Sarah Warren, born in 1985. The physical description matches your daughter-in-law perfectly. They've been working together for at least 8 years, possibly longer. I sank onto the kitchen stool, staring blankly out at the water while my world rearranged itself around this new truth. Brian hadn't been targeted by chance. He'd been hunted, tracked by 2 professional con artists who had spent months, maybe years, researching our family. They had mapped out our vulnerabilities and positioned themselves to strip us of everything. The woman Brian thought he loved, the wife he trusted, wasn't just a stranger. She was a predator. She had been dismantling his financial future piece by piece, all while smiling at him across the dinner table. My phone buzzed. Brian's name lit up the screen. Mom, something's wrong, his voice cracked. Sarah left early this morning and hasn't come back. She's not answering her phone. I found some papers in her dresser. I think I need to show you. What kind of papers? Bank statements, accounts I didn't even know existed, credit reports with my name on them for debts I never authorized, and photos. Mom, photos of our house, our cars, even documents from Dad's estate. It looks like she's been documenting everything. My blood ran cold. Brian, listen to me. Don't touch anything else. Don't move the papers. Don't call Sarah. Don't do anything until I get there. Mom, what's happening? What's going on? I'll explain everything when I see you. But Brian, my voice trembled. You need to prepare yourself. Sarah isn't who you think she is. When I arrived, Brian met me at the door looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. In his hand was a thick manila folder. Inside was the evidence of betrayal. Bank statements showing regular transfers to Patricia's accounts, photographs of insurance papers, investment records, legal files. Even pictures of me at family gatherings annotated with notes about my personality, my relationship with Brian, and my potential access to family resources. But the most chilling piece wasn't financial at all. It was a handwritten letter, neat cursive on lined paper. Mom, the Thompson situation is working better than we planned. Brian trusts me completely and has no idea about the loans. His mother is more suspicious than we anticipated. But her recent house purchase suggests she has significant hidden assets. We need to accelerate the timeline before she asks too many questions. The inheritance from the aunt was larger than expected. If we can gain access to those funds, this will be our biggest score yet. Brian read the letter with shaking hands. When he finished, his face crumpled. She never loved me.
No, sweetheart, he whispered.
I don't think she did. Our entire marriage, it was a lie. I'm afraid so. He crushed the letter in his fist and hurled it across the room. How could I be so stupid? How could I not see this? Because you're a good man who trusted the woman you loved, I said softly. That isn't stupidity, Brian. That's human. His jaw clenched. So what do we do now? Now, I said. Now we fight back. The very next morning, I called Detective Lisa Rodriguez of the Connecticut State Police Financial Crimes Unit. Within 2 hours, she was sitting in my living room, reviewing Marcus's report and the damning documents Brian had found. Mrs. Thompson, she said gravely, this is quite an operation. The level of planning and detail tells me they've done this before. Probably many times. My lawyer found evidence of similar schemes in Florida and North Carolina, I added. Rodriguez nodded, taking notes. We'll coordinate with those jurisdictions. But first I need to ask, do you know where Sarah and Patricia are right now? Sarah vanished yesterday morning. Patricia claims she's in Vermont. But I doubt that. Then we'll need to move fast, Rodriguez said. If they suspect they've been exposed, they'll try to grab whatever assets they can and disappear. That afternoon, Brian and I met with our bank. We froze every account we could and began reversing fraudulent transactions. But the process wasn't simple. Mr. Thompson, the bank manager explained, some of these transactions will be hard to reverse because you did sign the documents, even if you were misled about their purpose. Brian swallowed. So how much can we recover? Roughly 60%, the manager admitted. The rest depends on whether we can locate the perpetrators and recover assets. Brian's face fell. So I've lost over $70,000 permanently? Possibly. But Mrs. Thompson, there's something else you should know. My stomach tightened. Yesterday, someone attempted to access your accounts using forged power of attorney documents. They tried to transfer $2.3 million from your investment portfolio to an offshore account. Our fraud protection system flagged it, but it was a sophisticated attempt. Detective Rodriguez looked up sharply. They're accelerating their timeline. They know you're onto them. They're trying to grab as much as possible before they run. That evening, as I sat in my villa watching the sun bleed into Long Island Sound, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. Hello, Margaret. Patricia's voice was calm, almost amused. Patricia. Or should I call you Patricia Warren? She gave a soft, mocking laugh. You've been busy. I'm impressed. Most of our families never figure it out until it's far too late. Most of your families? How many people have you done this to? Does it matter? What matters is that you and I need to talk. I don't think we do. Oh, but we do, she purred. You see, Margaret, you've created quite a problem for me. The police, the frozen accounts, the investigation, it's messy. It's going to make things very difficult for Sarah and me. Good, I snapped. Not good, actually. Because here's what you need to understand. I know things about your family. Things that could be very embarrassing if they were made public. My heart pounded in my chest. What kind of things? Your late husband's business dealings, for instance. Some very questionable tax strategies. Some partnerships that weren't entirely legal. Would you like me to share those details with the IRS? Or perhaps the local paper? You're bluffing. Am I? Her voice curled with satisfaction. Tell me, Margaret, did you ever wonder why your husband left you such a large estate? Did you ever ask where all that money came from? My stomach turned. My husband was an honest businessman. No, Patricia said coldly. Your husband was a tax evader who hid income through shell companies for 15 years. And I have the documents to prove it. Documents that would destroy his reputation and cost you everything. His estate, Margaret, your estate. The room spun around me. What do you want? I asked, my voice trembling but steady enough to mask the storm inside me. Patricia's reply was cold, calculated. I want you to call off the investigation. I want the frozen accounts released. And I want a cashier's check for $3 million as a gesture of goodwill. Or, I release information that will destroy your family's reputation and likely put your son in prison as an accessory to his father's crimes. My blood ran cold. Brian doesn't know anything about his father's business. Oh, doesn't he? She purred. He signed plenty of documents over the years, Margaret, power of attorney forms, investment authorizations, tax papers. If I can prove he knew about the illegal activities, he's criminally liable. My hands shook. You planned this from the very beginning. I plan everything, Patricia replied. That's why I'm good at what I do. And if you pay me, then Sarah and I vanish, and your family secrets stay buried. Everyone wins. I need time to think, I whispered. You have 24 hours, she said. Tomorrow evening, I'll call with wire transfer instructions. When the line went dead, I sat in the darkness trying to decide what kind of woman I truly was. The old Margaret, the one who always protected her family's reputation at any cost, would have paid. She would have sacrificed herself to shield Brian. But the new Margaret, the woman who had bought a $3.2 million villa and discovered her own strength, had a different idea. I picked up the phone. Detective Rodriguez? I just received a blackmail demand from Patricia Warren. I think it's time to set a trap. The plan was simple but elegant. Detective Rodriguez outfitted me with a recording device for Patricia's final call and set up surveillance at 3 locations where she might try to collect the money. But before the trap could be sprung, I had to do something harder than any sting operation. I had to tell my son the truth. Brian, I said, as we sat in the living room, the afternoon sunlight stretching across the floor. There are things about your father's business you need to know. I explained it all. His tax evasion, the shell companies, the hidden income that terrified him for years. I confessed I had discovered the truth 2 years before his death. How he spent his final years desperately trying to legitimize our fortune through charities and careful investments. Brian sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. Did you know when you were married to him? Not until the end, I admitted. I signed papers, I handled routine business, but I didn't know the full truth until later. I signed things I didn't understand, just like you did with Sarah. He looked at me with haunted eyes. Are we going to prison, Mom? I don't know, I said honestly. But I do know this. I'm not paying blackmail money to find out. Whatever consequences come, we'll face them honestly. That evening Patricia called right on schedule. Detective Rodriguez was in the next room. Every word recorded. Have you made your decision, Margaret? I have, I said. The answer is no. Silence stretched, heavy and sharp. Then you don't understand the consequences, Patricia threatened. I understand perfectly. You'll expose my husband's tax evasion. You'll try to drag Brian into crimes he didn't commit. You might even succeed in destroying our reputation and draining us financially. I took a deep breath. But I won't give you $1 more. I'm done being afraid, Patricia. I'm done letting people like you control me with threats. You're making a mistake, she hissed. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. You'll regret this. I doubt it, I said calmly. You made one critical error in judging me. And what's that? You assumed I cared more about protecting my reputation than protecting my dignity. You were wrong. Then I hung up. Patricia made good on her threat within hours. The local paper received a package filled with damning documents. The IRS got their copy too. The next week was brutal. Lawyers, accountants, endless meetings. I paid $1.8 million in back taxes and penalties. Brian faced the terrifying possibility of criminal charges, though his lawyer believed his ignorance would shield him. But amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Brian and I grew closer than we had in years. Without secrets between us, without Patricia's poisonous manipulation, we began to rebuild. One evening, watching the sunset together, Brian whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. For the lies, the identity theft, for treating you like you couldn't handle your own life." Tears filled my eyes. "And I'm sorry too for keeping your father's secrets, for letting you fight Sarah alone. Do you think we'll get through this?" he asked. "I know we will," I said. "We may be poorer, wiser, but we'll survive." 3 months later, Detective Rodriguez called. "We found them," she said. "Patricia and Sarah. Mexico. They were running the same con in Guadalajara. The authorities arrested them. They'll be extradited to face charges here." "What kind of charges?" I asked.
Wire fraud.
"Identity theft. Extortion. Conspiracy. If convicted, they'll be gone for a very long time. We even recovered about $400,000. Not everything, but something." Sarah's absence made Brian's divorce simple. He sold the house that carried too many ghosts and moved closer to me. I kept the villa, not because I needed the space, but because it symbolized something far greater. It was the place where I stopped apologizing for existing. Now, a year later, I wake each morning to the sight of the sea. I think about what Patricia and Sarah taught me. That some people see kindness as weakness, generosity as stupidity, love as an opportunity for exploitation. That those closest to us can sometimes hurt us the deepest, not out of hatred, but because they see us as resources instead of people. But above all, they taught me something priceless. Dignity cannot be bought or preserved by hiding from conflict. Dignity is claimed by refusing to let others define your worth, your strength, or your choices. I'm 65 now. Brian visits me twice a week. We're rebuilding on honesty, not illusions. I've begun traveling, taking art classes, surrounding myself with people who see me as Margaret, not someone's mother, widow, or burden. And I've learned that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't getting even. It's refusing to stay small in a world that keeps trying to shrink you. The villa wasn't really about a house. It was about claiming space, demanding attention, and insisting on my right to exist fully. As a woman, as a mother, as myself. And in the end, that was the final payback.